All right. So thanks so much for coming out, Vicky. Thanks for the intro. It's a real treat to get to sit here with Porsche and discuss this great book, which is called "Better Than We Found It," written by her and her husband about basically every really crucial social justice topic going on right now. And it was a fascinating thing to read. I don't know if you guys have been able to access it, but it's a really pertinent and timely and like edifying thing to look into. So please do. To just get started, I'd love to learn and hear a little bit from you, Porsche, about what inspired you and your husband to take this project on and what was going on for you guys as you embarked on a pretty impressive and ambitious effort here.
Yeah, thanks. Is this working? Are we good? Can you hear me? You're okay. All right. Let me know if you can. I can speak loud. Backtracking a little bit, I guess. My husband, Frederick, had written a book called The Black Friend, How to Be a Better White Person. And so that book was a similar format, actually. For those of you who have not read the book, it kind of gives like these stories or anecdotes from our childhood to be relatable just from growing up, and then does an interview with a subject matter expert and sheds some light more, I guess, on the official like type of policy language or where we're at in the movement. So these are subjects in his book that were focused around race. In this book, Better Than We Found It, it's anywhere from disinformation, climate change, ableism, gun control, so a broad spectrum of different things. So in any case, how we got to writing this book. So he had written How to Be, The Black Friend, and his editor from Candlewick, they formed a really good relationship. She's a lovely human, Kaylin, and she, we had the pleasure of meeting her. It was right before the pandemic that they signed the seal for the Black Friend, and so we were in Florida, and that's where she lives, and so she met us, and it was right before the pandemic, so it was really actually quite lucky. And me and my husband, that is our vibe. That's our whole relationship. It's like we're not the funnest couple. We're like the ones who are like, oh, they like really always are talking about social issues and serious stuff. But I think in an inviting way, because I think one thing that me and my husband agree upon greatly is that like it shouldn't be this classist conversation. Everybody has an experience, right? So just transparently, and if you read my book, you probably know, like my mother has a 3rd grade education, and she is not dumb. She has a valuable opinion from the stuff that she's been through. She raised 3 kids, 3 biracial kids, so 3 black children as a white woman in the Northwest. Like her experience matters. So we kind of always cultivate these conversations. And so when Kaylin, who's a little bit more reserved actually, she saw this dynamic between me and my husband, which is like we love to just like talk through things. So I might spit something out and he's like, no, I don't think that's really right, because did you think about the nuance of it? I'm like, that's true. And so we go through these really in-depth, nuanced conversations, but we love for people to join in. And we didn't realize that sometimes that's not how people exist. They don't have those people around them having those conversations and asking them to join in. So for her, especially as a transplant, she's coming from Boston, but she had been in Florida for about 5 or 6 years now. And so she was like, oh, I don't have this in my life, and I love your guys' conversations and the way that you pulled me in, and it was so inviting, and it wasn't ostracizing at all, and I really enjoy that. Y'all should write a book together. And we were like, okay, well, would you like to acquire a book of ours together? And so after The Black Friend, which made the New York Times bestseller list and was pretty successful, we were like, let's circle back to that. Would you like us to like open this conversation up and make it a little bit broader, to not just be about race, but like touch on all of these social issues? And she said, yes, I'd love that. So we were like, this makes sense. So yeah.
Wow. Did she feel like there was, like a market for that? What was, in addition to just the intellectual curiosity she seems to have had. Did she say, "Oh man, I think the world is ready for a book like this. I think people want, not just me as the publishing person, but like, I think a lot of people would benefit from overhearing you guys' conversations in a certain way if that's what she was inspired by."
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Kaylin is no marketer. She's like just a really genuinely good person, but she has young children. And she was saying that that's what she would want to see, like, for her children, which is ironic because our book has been banned and my husband's book has been banned throughout Florida. So that is, so they won't.
This book too? This book
it's an
too?
accomplishment, actually.
This book too?
Yes, this book too. So it won't really be necessarily what her children see, but we were talking about pretty much how so many.
Smuggle in a few copies.
Right. We'll have to definitely smuggle them in. No, I'm laughing because my brother's a school teacher in Texas and it's been banned in his district too, and so it's been a conversation, yeah. But she is a really good person who was talking about like the future and how she likes living in Florida, their little carved out area of Florida, but how she hopes that the future generations, because they are going to be voting and whatnot, that they can have the awareness. And so that she would hope that this would get in their hands and that people could kind of keep that energy, because as we know, young people are more progressive, and as we get older, they become more conservative. So it's just like, let's have a deeper understanding. Let's have conversations for why we're progressive, why that feels so innate when we're young, and why we get away from it. Let's have conversations.
Wow. So in reading the book, a person realizes that this is clearly directed to a younger audience. It's really educational. There's educational stuff from like your lived experiences, anecdotes with friends, with colleagues, with people that you met along the road, just what happened to them and how does that reflect the larger conversation of a certain issue. And then there's these great definitions of all these terms that I think people throw around here and there without always taking the time to define them and know what we're talking about. So is it always from the get-go like intended for a younger audience? Is that like the mission of this project? And in addition, like how also might it be useful for other groups, older people, adults, if as it were?
Yeah, absolutely. I had mentioned the Black Friend earlier because it definitely influenced the way that we went about writing this. Because what we noticed with the Black Friend is that actually parents were the ones who were really benefiting from it.
Yeah.
And so their understanding of race and being able to then have the conversations with their children, and then, if their children were reading it, it was like a real conversation starter, because let's be honest, things have changed, like from generation to generation. I mean, I saw someone online the other day saying that they were surprised, like, oh wow, what a wild thing that Ruby Bridges is still alive. If you guys don't know, Ruby Bridges was the girl who integrated public schools, the first Black elementary student to integrate. So they were like, oh wow, that's so wild that she's still alive. But I'm like, is it wild? Like, my grandfather was like a sharecropper. And that's like sometimes that doesn't reach people. Like people don't understand that, because I think to be 15 years old, and then myself a millennial, like the disconnect right there, right? Like time is a strange thing here in this country. And so anyways, I guess just to say, we wanted to write it so that young people could read it, but in such a way that anyone could benefit from it. It's not supposed to be written in a way that's super complex or breaks down everything in the nuance. It's supposed to be pretty high level, but in such a way to spark curiosity. And that's why we actually have an extensive list of references in there, because if you want to do further reading, you definitely should, but this is like one of those high level, get you interested, understand it from a personal perspective, and then also from somebody who is working deeply in the work. So like, for instance, like Julian Castro is featured in our housing chapter on on housing equity. So like you have somebody just like from me telling a story about when I was a little girl and having a house fire and how that left us homeless, to Julian Castro, who is working in policy to defeat homelessness and create housing equity. So it's like we just wanted it to be very high level at every instance. If it touched you, either my story or if you were at the point where you could, where Julian's storytelling could resonate with you or policy conversations could resonate with you. So,
Yeah, that's totally true. In reading it, you realize, man, there's kind of space for everyone here. There's space for the policy people who might be interested in people leading these movements on a global level. And then it's also super personal from you guys' experience or people you've met, college friends, or whoever it happened to have been. I mean, it really, really does a great job of, bridging those gaps between the macro level and then the personal. One phrase that I was really interested in that came up in the introduction is that one of your kind of goals seems to have been to shine a light or to bring us to think about how we might be doing wrong in the world. Like one of our goals in the book, I can't remember exactly the phrasing, but we wanted to show how people are maybe unintentionally doing wrong things in the world. Why was that important to you? And how did you get into that? How did you bring that out through the reading or through the book?
yeah, I mean that's definitely. So I have a dog, and he's the sweetest dog, and I just am like of the impression that all dogs are just good, right? They're just like good in nature. They're just like good, and they're simple, and they want what they want. And he's a bully. Like right now, my husband's at home, and I was like, don't let the dog bully you. But he just
he bullies you guys. He doesn't bully his littler dogs. He bullies his owners.
Yeah, like he doesn't really bully me because he knows like boundaries are established. But he bullies my husband because my husband gives him treats when he doesn't know what else to do with him. So anyway, but dogs are good. Dogs are inherently good, and I actually think that people are too. And a lot of the times, the stuff that we're doing that's super harmful, we don't have the capacity or the time to understand that. And it's like the great example of that is in climate change. Many of us, I can't say we all care. Many of us care so deeply. And you'll even see that by like people choosing to carry around a straw so that they don't create waste with the straw, right? And so people do care. I believe that people are good and they do care. I just think that we don't always create the spaces for them to understand the harm, to understand how they can make changes to do better. And so if we were brutally honest with ourselves and if we were having conversations about who we're harming and understand too that like even the straw example is such a good example because that just kind of proves like the nature of humans to want to try, but understanding that when we're fracking and when we're drilling for oil and we're doing all of these very big scale things, that's not necessarily like a personal choice, so it kind of like obliges you. You need to actually, if you're going to carry around a straw, you need to also care about politics. You need to understand what's being done, and you need to also understand how to have these conversations, how to vote, and how to, if you say that you care about the environment and you're going to carry around a straw, keeping up on current events and putting that effort in to have the conversations about how we can actually create change on a bigger scale.
Okay, so question about that. Very interesting that you mentioned the straw and this issue of environment, climate change and stuff. Did you encounter, or how do you guys discuss, or what do you think about people just feeling disenchanted with the possibility of making change? Because a person, virtuous though it may be, to carry around a straw or to recycle, like we recycle, my family recycles. Half the time it feels like our recycling is just going to the same place as our garbage or whatever. Like it just doesn't seem like there's that much impact. And then you do learn a little bit about what's going on in the world, and like all these major industrial nations, US, China, India, whoever all, and then you're like, okay, so I'm one person carrying around a straw compared to that, or I'm one person trying to be a good friend, or I'm one person trying to do such and such, compared to all of that. Like, how do you like maintain a message of empowering young people or empowering people to like be active when whatever, I perceive that to be a reality. I think a lot of people may also. Like, it's hard. It's a steep mountain to climb. And I don't know, how do you engage with that as a person trying to share this message of inspiration, motivation, social justice? I don't know, how do you process that?
No, absolutely, because it's tiring. It's really hard. It's not easy to be an activist in this country. I mean, we think about race specifically, like many black people, many people would agree that probably the civil rights movement never ended. This is just an extension of, so when you see a moment like 2020, that's just an extension of, so like while the posting a black square is great, I don't think that you mean to harm black people. There's a chapter in there called something about Frederick wrote about black squares aren't enough.
Yeah, black squares aren't enough. Naming your street after a black person isn't enough.
Right.
This kind of what do you call it? Like symbolic gestures are fall short, right?
Absolutely, and so, but you have the person who posts the black square. That's not a bad person. That's someone who probably is upset that black people's lives are being taken, and although it might not personally affect them, so that black square might be where it ends. And what we're challenging people is that it's not where it ends, and it also isn't like you need to, there's ways in which you can think of, and you don't need to make excuses of like, well, this is all I can do. I can't be in the streets every day protesting with my sign for Black Lives. Okay, but you can challenge that racist family member at Thanksgiving and say, I'm not coming because the way that they speak makes me uncomfortable because it's racist, and I'm going to call it racist. And I'm not going to tiptoe around that anymore. They are racist. And I think for young people, especially Gen Z, I'm always impressed with the ways in which they've used social media to really activate around things. And my hope with this book was that I want that to show up in real life. I want them to show up, and I want them to be empowered, and I want them to feel bold and saying like, hey, I'm not going to be shy about calling you racist anymore. Like, hey, it's not the black person's job to feel uncomfortable because you're racist. As a white person who's your family member, I'm going to call you racist, and that can sit with you however you want it to, because too many people are harmed from your racist behavior. And so that's the difference, I think, between like carrying around the straw is important. That's definitely a signal that you care about the environment, and I trust that. Like, I have good faith in that. But then also, what's the next step? How are we making this part of the decisions that we make and where we go to work, the conversations which we're having, and the ways in which we're voting, the ways in which we're deciding to protest, how we think about protests. So,
awesome. One of the incredible things about this book, or another incredible thing about this book, was how many people were included in terms of stories, but it also, you had this incredible list of people you've interviewed who are whose perspectives are represented across, again, as we've said, like a really broad range of important issues. So one question is, how did you guys determine who was going to speak on what, who was going to be the thought leader or expert on a given topic? You have Chelsea Clinton, you have Julian Castro, you have Robert Reich, you have all these people. I was really excited to hear the story of, I jotted his name down here, we chatted before, Danielle Alejandra Leon Davis, who is not necessarily a person widely known as those folks are, but really relevant nevertheless. And so I'm curious and excited to learn, how did you guys figure out what voices to include and on what topics, and what was that whole process like?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Absolutely. That was actually really fun, because I think I had mentioned kind of me and my husband's relationship and how we like to dive into the nuance of things. And so we were like very, very careful in curating these interviews. And so, for instance, like Elizabeth Warren is featured in the chapter about education. And so that makes a lot of sense, right? Although I would have let Elizabeth Warren be in whatever chapter she wanted to be in, because I'm a big Elizabeth Warren fan and I think she's great. Being in
and some of us may also be, who knows?
Right. So in any case, we had this kind of wish list of who we'd want to be in different chapters, and then we also had people who were meaningful to us in our lives. So for instance, Daniel, who you mentioned, he's in our immigration chapter. And he's just a dear friend of ours who we have known for many years. And he is so smart, graduated top of his class. He had been living in, and I don't know how many of you have read this book, so I'm just kind of rehashing the story. He had been living in Miami since he was 4 years old. I mentioned he graduated top of his class and was accepted to all these different amazing universities, and he never knew that he did not have citizenship. His mother didn't tell him. So until he was going to apply for FAFSA and all that, and they were like, oh, do you have your X, Y, and Z proof of whatever, and that's when he learned that he was not a citizen. And from there on, it was just challenge after challenge. And this is somebody who went on to graduate from Georgetown and do all this amazing work in politics. He's an activist. He's all these different things. And then he also is gay. And so even though he applied for citizenship or for his green card when he found that out when he was 17 or 18 years old, it wasn't until gay marriage was legalized that he was actually able to gain his citizenship through that. And that was, much, much later, I think when he was nearly 30 years old. So he had been sitting there waiting for his green card to be processed for a decade. Although he was an outstanding citizen, literally everything that you could want. And it just wasn't good enough. He spiraled into depression, he did all things, and so then finally, when gay marriage was legalized, him and his now husband were like, okay, this is a route, and it's so unfortunate, and the things that he's done. So now he runs entire campaigns to mobilize and empower immigrants, to help people gain citizenship. He just does amazing work in the community, and it's like this person just lived for years under this immense stress and invalidation of their livelihood. They couldn't even go to school. And so that's someone who we knew personally, and just knowing his story had touched me. So I was like, that's who I want to interview. Elizabeth Warren is in the chapter before him, and then he is there, and he's just a person who works a 9 to 5 and gets stuff done. But he is the person who touched me when it came to immigration. So I was like, let's definitely feature him.
So as you describe his experience, an activist, an immigrant, a gay person, he's got his toe in a lot of different pools. Even Elizabeth Warren, she's your education thought leader there, but she's also obviously, as some of us may know, a real activist on economic issues and consumer protections. So, and this gets into this idea that we're all living in these various different spaces, which you note in the book is intersectionality, which is kind of one of the crucial fulcrum points around which this whole thing seems to pivot, right, in all these different ways. So how do you guys make sure or did you guys make an intentional effort to lift up that concept and understand, allow readers, or make sure the message was delivered that, that we're not just a black person living worrying about black people things, and we're not just a poor person worrying about poor people things, we're not just an incarcerated person worrying about, everybody's operating in all these different spaces. And how did you guys work to lift that up? Because you did, it really worked. It came through, and I was wondering what type of intentionality was behind that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'll give my husband a lot of credit in that space, and the conversations that we've been having over the course of, we've been together for 6 years now. Intersectionality is really important to me, but I think I mentioned I'm biracial. My mother's white, my father's black, and I'm from the Northwest. That is a very different identity then my husband is a black man from Yonkers, New York, from South Yonkers, raised by a young black mother. So, I mean, those are just two different black identities, but not anything the same. And we talk about it a lot. And we talk about how it influences, even like for me, my family's from the South, so my grandparents are from the Black Belt, from Montgomery, Alabama, and they have like all these natural disasters come through. And that's always been a part of my life, understanding that, like, even when I would go visit them every summer, so it would be, you know, sometimes I couldn't go because they would just have a tornado, and then I'd have to wait a couple of weeks or whatever, have you, but like, for my husband in New York, that's not a thing. Even like something as simple as like earthquake drills that we had in the West, he was like, what is that? So like intersectionality is so important, and I think that that's something that we've spoken about. Is really taken away from us in white supremacy, like the concept that there is just like a black experience, but like everybody kind of has their own experiences. If you talk to them, depending on how they identify in sexuality, gender, all these different things that are geography, super important, right? Even colorism. And so in that, I think that the intersections were really, we were really thoughtful in being creative in how we interviewed people with intersections. So for instance, the immigration, it's like, okay, well, what about this factor too of like, you can't get married. So you can't even get your residency through marriage because you have that going against you for just being gay. You can't even get married. So it's all these different things that we were very thoughtful of. Chelsea Clinton, we put in the disinformation because if you're like, I don't know what would be more like probably wild than her experience for disinformation with just being, you know, growing up during that time when the internet was coming about and your father and your mother and politics and there's Pizzagate and all these things. So we were like, let's ask her.
That was a very apropos choice. This is one of the first chapters. It's about basically fake news and the creation of fake narratives. And your husband experienced it once, I guess, as he was leading part of Biden's campaign, maybe? Warren's campaign. So to discuss it with Chelsea Clinton, it was like, wow.
Right.
Nailed it. How did it go? What was the conversation like?
Oh, she's amazing. She's amazing. She's so intelligent, but that's not one of her big things, like disinformation. So you have to think about the intersections of just her being a young woman, a daughter of politicians. It's like when you're thinking about somebody holistically and not just like, oh, what are their, what do they proclaim their passions are, or what their activism is around. No, it's just kind of like, you're a human who had to experience that, and I'm curious how that felt.
Was she like down to talk about something that may not be top of her agenda? I mean, maybe it is, I don't know, but like she's got expertise in a lot of
her everyday conversation in the way that I felt like she was more excited about it, because the reality is people have like these like talking points.
Yeah,
and
right.
You notice that, like especially the politicians. Like,
it's cooked a little already.
Yeah. Oh, it's impressive though. Like I'm like, wow, you say that so like everyone just knows what they're gonna say. But when you catch somebody kind of off guard, you're just like, oh, I want to talk about something as random as disinformation. But she's just so smart.
Oh yeah.
So
it came off authentic, huh?
Yeah, super
that's
authentic.
Cool. So one question I want to ask, and then I'd like to, if there's questions among the crowd here, anybody who's got any curiosities, love to learn about it. Though it's just about what were like some of your biggest challenges? You've spoken like really positively about working on this with your husband, and I don't know if others are married, but that's not easy. I'm married myself. To work on this type of a project where so much creative energy is coming from potentially different directions, and having to kind of navigate that and compromise and all that sounds very difficult to me. So maybe that wasn't a challenge. I don't know. I don't want to presume. But what were some of the biggest challenges that you guys faced as you put this together?
Well, that was a challenge and a benefit. It was the challenge in it was I had mentioned that he has 4 published books in a pretty short span of time. He changed careers, I think, in like 2019 and started writing full time as an author and just started. He's a super A-type personality, a very New York A-type personality, which is like the most A-type personality that anyone could ever create. And so with that, when he gets focused on something, he's just locked in until he finishes. And that is like the opposite of my creative spaces. So I also paint. So I'm just somebody who like generally I'm like I like to create, and when I feel like it, and then I need to step away from it. I don't want to see it anymore. I hate it, and then I want to come back to it. And that's just not how he is. And he's so. I needed his input actually. I was like because we wanted to write in a similar voice so that it wasn't too all over the place. And so he was like, I don't want to influence your voice too much because I know that I have a strong voice because I've been writing so much, but you have a strong voice too in our conversations. But like since this is your debut book, take the first stab at writing a couple chapters so that I can see how I can gel with your voice. And so you can see that in here because my background comes from I have a master's in econometrics, which is like statistical economics more from a statistical standpoint, and so I love data and I love facts and I like to prove stuff, and so I was like researching a lot for this, and for me it resonates deep with me when I see like a data point or something to research. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's astounding, and so I would want so much for my readers to see that too. But that doesn't make for like a fun storytelling experience, right? And he's a good storyteller. He's like, I don't even pay attention to any of the research. The research is my experience, and that's like his style. And so you'll see that he actually like really researched. We both added a lot of statistics and a lot of references. And so in the book, each chapter has like, it's all listed there. I mean, so many references, and so he kind of adjusted to that. But the thing that I think I adjusted to for him is I don't know, that being really shy. Like I didn't want to, like I wanted to take time with it, and at a certain point he was like, you need to just like show us the chapters. And so my editor
like you were a little timid about showing what you'd written.
Yeah, because he had been writing, and most of my writing is like in research, like previously.
Okay.
And so I was like, God, you're like a fun person. You're like a fun storyteller. And I'm like a researcher.
Right.
So I was like trying so hard to be like relatable. And so he'd be like, you need to cough it up. Like you need to come up with
just let's see it. We need to know. Like.
Yeah. And so my editor was really great too because she had seen that dynamic between us. And so she just wanted to capture that. So they were both really honest about like, I don't like that story. And that
How'd
made
that
me feel
feel?
better. It made me feel better. Because I was like, when I'm on the fence about something, I'm like, at least this person will tell me, like, I'm not feeling that. And it's like, okay, so when you are, and when you say that you do like this story, then I know that you really like this story, so it can give me some direction. So there was times where, like, he was just brutally honest, like, oh, yeah, I'm not feeling that. That's, like, really drawn out, and it didn't capture me. And other times where he's like, this is it. I love this. Like, this is how you told me this story about your childhood, and, like, I 100% feel like you captured that, and that made me feel like, okay, that's like
I can do
some direction.
Some confidence.
That's some direction,
Real authentic feedback.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Cool. That's incredible. What a dynamic. Great to have that editor. What a blessing.
I know.
She seemed to really know what she was after.
And she's editing now his first fiction novel. They acquired Candlewick acquired that fiction. So look for that.
A good opportunity to have him back. Have you guys back?
They have a great.
Nice.
She's great, the editor, but they have a really good working dynamic. So.
Cool. The other thing I was wanting to add is the data, some of the statistics and numbers and research that it adds so much to the educational nature of this.
Baby.
What's that?
that was my contribution.
That's what I'm trying to say. Give you some flowers here. Like, you deserve it. Because that was a really grounded part of it that just, one of the things that was so cool about this book is how it synergizes all these different things, right? You got your experts, you got your anecdotes, and you got the data. So it's like this kind of all-encompassing way of telling these stories that, again, like includes a lot of voices and a lot of perspectives and a lot of different ways people can learn. How we're getting more and more familiar with different learning styles of everyone, and I just think this is very accommodating for so many people. So congratulations again. Are there any questions that, is everyone in the back there? The lights are a little hard. So just, if you could, I could pass this around, or you can stand up and scream, I don't know, whatever's best.
Hi there. I live in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and I'm new to Gloucester. And I wanted to ask a question about the arts, and the responsibility of how to integrate. I don't know if you touch on this in your book. Sorry, I haven't read this yet. So, I'm going to use a specific example. There's a slave deed on a wall in a museum. And it's a house museum. The house just has so much stuff in it. And it also has a Louverture statue, the Haitian revolutionary, and he's made into like a dinner bell, and it's like a folk rendition. So these are just like two sort of problematic pieces with no context in this museum that has nothing to do, with slavery or the history of that. So I was just wondering if you could speak to like the role of the arts and the responsibility of that as it pertains to that example.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's something for me to even think on, because I don't know, I'm not familiar with that specifically, but you gave specific examples, and so that's complicated. I think that obviously I'm big on, not obviously, I guess it's not so obvious. We can't ignore the past, and I don't like the idea of people pretending to, but I also don't like the idea of people putting stuff out there just to exist without any context of like, we're going to make sure that we're making a statement that this was wrong and this is like acknowledging our past and that this is here for a reason and a learning reason, and to acknowledge my ancestors and what they went through. So yeah, so it's very complicated, because I think that I can't get away from that specific instance that you brought up, but like, I think people of color, and I'm not even gonna say people of color, I'm gonna specifically say Black Americans, are absolutely untapped creativity. I mean, the creativity that has came about from Black people in this country is, we should all be thankful for. And without many resources to do so, like, right, it's not easy to be an artist for anyone. And it's certainly not easy to be a Black artist. And so, when in spaces that, like museums, that portray artwork, and I don't know if that artwork that you were mentioning was by a Black artist or a white artist. I'm not sure.
It's just a framed photograph of a slave deed that was acquired. It's from Albany, and it's just a piece of it. He has it on the wall like it's a conversation piece. That's how originally the house was, and it stood the same as it for like 100 years. And so they're resistant to change it, or there's really no place to put it's not like a museum where you're reading a bunch of placards, it's a house full of crap. It's like stuffs, all kinds of things in it, so. But the docents just pointed out as, and here's this slave deed. Isn't this weird? It has the wrong date on it. And then they move on to, and then here's all this, this stuff. And so I was just really taken aback by the whole experience and just surprised that no one has addressed it, really.
Yeah, no, and it's not weird at all. It's like literally a big piece of our history. Like, Black people built this country, so it's not weird or random. It's a slave deed because enslaved people built this country. And so, yeah, I mean, it's to me, stuff without context is like, is harmful for me personally. I think I'm learning a lot too, even being in the East Coast. I've been in New York now for 6 years, but I'm originally from the West Coast. And we don't have a long history like the East Coast and the South do. And so you don't see stuff like that very often. And so, but what you do see a lot is, and we have a chapter about Native Americans and land rights in there, and then you would see a lot of their items, their artwork, put in museums with no permissions, no things like that. And so, I mean, all of it's at the same vein to me. It should be the people who created that, the people who were harmed by that should have the control of that. And so that's, I mean, unfortunate thing about especially the Northeast, finding more and more is just I mean, I'm surprised and taken aback, but I don't know too much about what the conversation is. It's not right. In my view, it's not right.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this this conversation. And I guess my question is, what's next for you? In terms of, you know, this is like step one of a major conversation. Are you thinking about, what are you thinking about?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, so I work with children right now and educating children, and my next steps is personally evolving this conversation and trying to get this book in the hands of more folks. So even for instance, like the book bans and all of the things that we've seen that I mentioned, like in Texas, my brother's school district, all of my friends who are educators and the people I work with who are educators, it's really trying to get these conversations front and center because we're coming up on a really important election. And so that's my current work. Into the future, I mean, one thing that's important to me is creating art, and like I just said, I think that enabling people of color and people from different backgrounds and people from different intersections, all sorts of intersections really, empowering them to create art, because I think that's a form of activism in itself, and when we can get those voices to be louder and more centered, that is important to a cultural shift. So empowering marginalized artists, young creators, and enabling them to speak up, that's a focus for me right now, and focusing on my own art, my own painting, and my own writing. And so that's really what in my life feels good right now. For my husband, I think I mentioned that he's writing fiction, and because that's what feels good for him right now, because it's been a conversation for us how draining it is sometimes to constantly be talking about all of these different ways in which we are marginalized ourselves. But it doesn't mean that the work stops, obviously. Like, just because it's draining doesn't mean that we can't have them. But also understanding rest and our own abilities to create, and what makes us artists and what makes us thrive and what makes us happy as inspiration for others, and for being able to work to provide that for young people, but also lead by example. Like, the fact is that he got his break in writing because of his subject matter expertise in being a marginalized Black person. So when he wrote The Black Friend, How to Be a Better White Person, I don't think that, like, that's a childhood dream. I don't want my children to dream of writing The Black Friend, How to Be a Better White Person. Right now he's writing like a fiction, like a love story of like some high school kids in New York, and he's happy doing that. And I think that's probably what people who aren't that marginalized are happy doing, just creating, just having imagination. And so I want people to have that, but that doesn't mean that the work stops or that we can ignore reality. So for me, the next steps are continuing this conversation, doing it. Unfortunately, this is the first book. I said my husband had 4 books. This is the first one that didn't make the New York Times bestsellers list, which is fine by me. I don't care if it's making a difference. I just think that does say something about the sales. So therefore, I'm concerned that it's not getting in the hands of people, or people are losing interest in these issues, and it's not the time. Like, we are seeing women's rights be taken away left and right. We're seeing the issue of race become less mainstream, but still existing all the same So these are not issues that I'm willing to like be quiet about. So that's my goal.
One of
That's
the
what's next.
ways that, thank you. One of the ways that some people are expressing, especially these conversations and interviews, is through a podcast. They seem very popular now, and that's really catching on. And I just wondered if you ever thought about, doing something like that. And I mean, it is kind of mainstream, but it's also, if you're interviewing people and you're having a conversation. So.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you, because it's a competitive landscape with the podcast, but I would love that. I mean, y'all can hear that I love to talk, so a podcast wouldn't be too far-fetched. But no, those conversations definitely, like I love this, I love the dialogue, and so maybe that's in the future.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna have to be the last person because we've got to get you out to sign books, my dear. But I just wanted to, am I not talking loud enough?
Someone over here wants to.
Okay.
Question.
Oh, okay, you have a question, Molly?
Yes, I do.
All right, well then I'm gonna shut up and let you ask the question.
Good. Give me one.
First of all, thank you to coming to the Tiny Indie Report. We appreciate you. Second of all, I am like dying to know. You're getting so much pushback. You're getting backlash. You're getting banned. I only see your husband's post on Instagram when he posts a picture of a white family.
Right.
What the hell is going on? How are you feeling? How are you rising above it? And what can we do to prevent it?
Love that question. Thank you. So, for all y'all who don't, my husband has a platform on social media, and he is like shadow banned. For those of you who don't know what that means, it's really like the algorithm does not allow, it suppresses his posts. So every time he posts, even like, I like all of his posts, I should see his post. I don't see his post because they have algorithms that suppress posts by Black people and on race. But generally too, like if a Black person posts a picture with their face, it will not get shown to people the way that like a white person's will. So he actually has to post a white face, a white family on his post, and then say, please read whatever underneath the caption. Sorry. It's sad because you're saying that you see them too. It's not.
They're the only ones I see.
They're the
and
only
I like
ones.
every single story and post, and I only see
Right.
when he posts a picture of a white person.
Right. And so it's real. And so I think people, have even pushed back saying like, oh, that's not real, shadow banning or suppression isn't that serious, you're being paranoid. No, it's real. Like even I see the post of the white family and I don't see others. So I'm sorry, you were saying what your question was though?
My question was like, what can we do to help with that? And how are you and Frederick and your kids, like how are you feeling with backlash, getting banned, getting shadow banned, getting banned from,
Right.
I mean, this is a lot of feelings and work that you're doing, and like, how are you rising above it, and also what can we do?
Right, okay, so one thing you can do is he made a Substack, so if you would like to sign up, subscribe to that Substack, he's trying to cultivate, it's free, and trying to just cultivate a mailing list so that he can start using more of a mailing list than like social media to depend on, because we don't know the future of social media with like Twitter, as we've seen with Elon Musk and all of that, like stuff is just, we don't know the future of social media. But he has like a platform, and so those are people who are invested, to your point, and we want to make sure that we are able to still reach those people even if social media is no longer like a thing. Even with TikTok and all of the stuff that's going on, we just don't know the direction of that. And it feels pretty terrible, I'm not gonna lie. It feels pretty terrible because it feels like, and for that reason, I don't have a social media platform. Like my sole job is like a partner is like supporting the fact that is such a terrible experience. So even like my social media is private, I point people in the direction of Frederick's, like we try to cultivate as much like low-key joy as we can at home, because the stuff he has to face, like you don't know the amount of times he's called the N-word every single day online, like the death threats, people have gotten our address and emailed us, oh, this is your address, and all sorts of like it's not fun. It's absolutely not fun. And so, but the work is important, and so I think the thing that you could do to support is liking, sharing the things that we know help improve that algorithm, or at least push back against it in every way that you can, even if you just like comment like a thumbs up or something. Signing up for that Substack so that we can kind of move away from that and promote our books. The link is in his bio, and it will just like allow you to just enter your email on his Instagram and probably Twitter.
What is the name of the Substack?
The Substack, Frederick T. Joseph on Substack.
Thank you.
Yeah, and he's writing some beautiful things. So also just in consideration, it's like for me, where I'm trying to go with art is like if people can have those intersections and exist and not have to solely exist to educate others or white folks or whoever. Like if his experience that he's had as a black man is like, I am black, I am a black man, and I've had this experience, and now I'm writing about something that has nothing to do with being a black man, but I live as a black man, so like it's worthwhile to like read about my experiences or like my relationship with jazz music or something like that. So just in supporting artists and the different things that they're doing, and I know everyone's on their learning journeys, and I would not discourage them from reading things that help improve them as people, but also like understand it's a different world. Like for me, I read black authors because it wasn't like doing the work, it's just what felt good for me, finally felt good for me. And how many times did I have to read Little Women or whatever the hell my English department was making me read, Huckleberry Finn or whoever, Faulkner, whatever, I don't know, John Steinbecks and all these people that I had to read. It's like, well, have you read the Morrisons? Have you read Bell Hooks? Have you read Maya Angelou? Have you read these people? And not because like you're here for like a learning moment, but because like these are actually valid and valuable writers in American history, the same way that I have to read white authors. And so, not to discourage people from reading, things that help them get to the places they need to be and doing the work, but also like it's good to know sometimes, because for me, when I was in high school and I finally read my first Maya Angelou book, I think I sat in and I read them all. I read like 5 of them, and I was like, oh my God, finally, something that feels relevant for me. And I don't expect that everyone has that experience. Maybe in their own ways, maybe like in whatever way it is that they feel seen, but it's good to sometimes dabble. Like I know that I definitely have identities that other people have identities rather, that I do not know, and I make it my job to know a little bit more. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
I think that's perfect timing. That's it. So,